Hello, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And today, a special Mindfields, our Mindfield number 300, if you can believe it. The root of the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran. And for this, we'll be looking back into some early executive intelligence review reporting and uncovering some facts that I think are crucial in our analysis. So let's go. Well, I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome back to McDuff Lives. And it's Monday morning, the 2nd of March, 2026. And I woke up over the weekend to a war. And I think everybody needs to be focusing on this war and to try to sort out what's really going on here. It's the opinions I've read have gone from yay, Trump, he's finally clearing out the nest of vipers in Iran, to no, this is unconstitutional, this is setting back the world, and we're going to have an oil crisis and the economy will die. It's one or the other, or is it possible that the masters of 5D chess have planned out some other outcome that we don't foresee yet? Well, one thing that I know is that there is always more to the story than what you read in contemporary history books or in your school books or get from the major media outlets in the form of, quote, news, unquote. And, one of the sources I've been using for a number of years now is to dig back into the LaRouche organization's publication, Executive Intelligence Review. Well, let's think about Iran and bring that back into context as people were thinking in 1979, critical thinkers, not the mainstream, but the ones that are trying to really dig and look behind the curtain to find out who's really pulling the strings. And, that effort continues today. It is very interesting to see how some people have taken the radical side of Trump is right and it's great, and some others are taking the other side, saying this is the worst thing he could do. It's going to destroy his presidency, and we're going to lose the midterms if we don't lose our stock market. Okay, so a lot at stake, a lot between these two extremes, and the American people have got to wake up and start paying attention. Well, enough introduction. I want to go now to an article that was published in 1979, and it is called Ayatollah Khomeini is a Savak Agent. Well, what do you think of that? Ayatollah Khomeini, the first Ayatollah, the one that took power in the Iranian Revolution with the hostage crisis and October Surprise and all of those events that happened back in 1978, 79, 80. Well, let's get into this text because I think that it's got the necessary elements to make sense to me here in 2026. So this is what, almost 50 years ago. I'll make it a little bit bigger for you. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini is neither an Ayatollah or a Khomeini, according to information from high-level Iranian intelligence sources. Again, this is a 1979 article in EIR. For the first time, the Executive Intelligence Review is presenting material gathered concerning the true story of Ayatollah Khomeini. What emerges from this exclusive story is that the Ayatollah is a product of the Iranian underworld, the secretive Muslim Brotherhood, and Savak, the notorious Iranian intelligence service. Far from being a religious man, Khomeini inhabits the nether regions where assassination, drug traffic, and the hush-hush activities of the CIA, British intelligence, and Israel's Mossad cross paths. We present that story now in summary form. Khomeini and the Mossad. In 1953, the intelligence services of the United States, Great Britain, and Israel collaborated to topple the government of Iran's Prime Minister Mossadegh and restore to the throne the Pahlavi dynasty of the Shah. Although the actual operation to install the Shah was a highly professional, almost surgical military deployment, the credibility for the operation was provided by a synthetic demonstration in the streets by pro-Shah forces. The chief organizers of those demonstrations, small in size but given wide publicity in the media abroad, were the Shiite followers of Ayatollah Kashani and his aide, a mullah named Shams Khanad Abadi. By paying their sheep-like followers, Ayatollah Kashani and company, quote, got out the troops. At least part of the money to sponsor the phony demonstrations was conduited through the CIA's Kermit Roosevelt. Pardon me a second. Lost among the perhaps 5,000 noisy agents in the streets who were demanding the downfall of Mossadegh was an unknown mullah named Khomeini. His true name is lost in the early 20th century. What is known is that in the early 1930s, when most Iranians for the first time began using last names, the man who became known as Ruhollah Khomeini selected the name for himself. His two brothers chose different last names, one calling himself Hindi because of his dealings in British-controlled India. In the early 1950s, the Khomeini Hindi brothers were put on the payroll of Ayatollah Kashani. Kashani, who at first pretended to support Mossadegh, was very close to the leadership of the ultra-clandestine Muslim Brotherhood, called in Iran the Fayadin-e-Islam. The acknowledged leader of the Fayadin at the time was Ayatollah Navasabafi. At the time, the Fayadin members. I'm sorry, there's something missing there in the text. It had been in secret existence since the early 1940s, when out of Egypt, the British intelligence service created the international apparatus of its Ikhwan al-Muslimun, and the reference to an earlier EIR article for that reference. Muslim Brotherhood, London's Shock Troops for the New Dark Ages was the title of May 8th to 14th, 1979 article. So is that not interesting that the British, according to this article and their research, created the Muslim Brotherhood? In Iran, the fanatic Fayadin were known almost exclusively for a series of spectacular assassinations, including at least 2 prime ministers. In 1953, just before the fall of Mossadegh, Kashani had been operating primarily through Iran's organized crime underworld. The Iranian mafia is called Chakukesh, which means knife slayers in Persian, derived from their trademark of stabbing people to death with concealed daggers. The hunting ground of the Iranian mafia is the bazaar, especially the critical fruit and vegetable markets. They control prostitution, gambling, and especially narcotics. 2 lieutenants of Ayatollah Kashani, the kingpin of the mafia at the time, provided the demonstrators against Mossadegh in 1953 on Roosevelt's command. Behind the scenes lurked the Fedayeen. Still relatively unknown was Ayatollah to be Khomeini. After the 1953 putsch, General Zahedi and General Bakhtiar emerged as the enforcers of the CIA regime. General Bakhtiar was the administrator in Tehran of the martial law apparatus. In 1954, that apparatus was institutionalized with the creation of SAVAK, whose first director was the sadistic General Bakhtiar. From the start, the SAVAK, which immediately received training and other support from the Mossad, especially the Mossad's torture specialists, put on its payroll the mafia-controlled network of phony mullahs and ayatollahs who received salaries ranging from $100 to $1,000 or more per month. One of them was Ruhollah Khomeini, who, sources say, was paid $300 per month as a SAVAK agent. At the time, he held a minor teaching post in Qom, Iran. In 1955, there were 11 Mossad and Shin Bet agents to organize the SAVAK. By 1976, over 500 Israeli intelligence personnel were in Tehran, controlling virtually every branch of the SAVAK apparatus. Quote, there were only two kinds of mullahs in Iran in the 1950s, said an informed source, those that were pro-SAVAK and those that were in jail, unquote. Khomeini was not one of those in jail. The next little section is about JFK, and we're talking about 1961 and an effort by JFK to get the Shah to lighten up and be more a better ruler for the people of Iran, to stop oppressing them and just basic human rights stuff. So this was, of course, when Kennedy was early in his presidency and trying to do all kinds of good things all around the world. The JFK connection. When John F. Kennedy's British-dominated administration took power in 1961, trouble began in Iran. Kennedy imposed on the Shah, using the SAVAK apparatus and U.S. leverage, a prime minister who started agitating for reforms. In 1962, the Shah visited Washington for a talk with Kennedy to propose a deal. If Kennedy would allow the Shah to oust the Prime Minister Amini, then the Shah himself would implement the resolutions demanded by Washington. Kennedy accepted the deal, and then the Shah, back in Iran, reneged. So, later that year, Kennedy called General Bakhtiar to the United States. Ostensibly, SAVAK's Bakhtiar was here for, quote, medical treatment, unquote, but he secretly held a meeting with JFK in the White House to plot against the Shah. However, the Shah discovered the plot, fired Bakhtiar, and purged the entire SAVAK apparatus. The new SAVAK chief was a moderate who attempted to control the state within a state that was SAVAK. Meanwhile, Bakhtiar fled the country, first to Geneva, Switzerland, and then to Baghdad, Iraq. From a secret headquarters, General Bakhtiar began inciting riots against the Shah. The chief agent for Bakhtiar was none other than Ayatollah Khomeini, who had risen fast in the British-Israeli ranks of SAVAK. After reactionary riots in which maybe 5,000 people died, Khomeini was summarily expelled from the country, first residing in Izmir, Turkey, and then traveling to Iraq to be at Bakhtiar's side. Bakhtiar was assassinated a few years later, probably by an agent of the Shah, and Khomeini was left alone in Iraq, a lonely mullah. There he stayed for 15 years, waiting. Enter Jimmy Carter. With the inauguration of the Carter administration in 1977, trouble started in Iran again when Zbigniew Brzezinski began his hypocritical human rights drive. The Shah was among the first targets. Overnight, a half-dozen human rights organizations sprouted in Iran, all backed by Britain, Israel, or the U.S. Khomeini got his start in the following way. Libya's Muammar Gaddafi, always a sucker for an idiotic scheme, passed a check for $164,000 to Saeed Gotbzadeh, a Muslim Brotherhood fanatic who was working closely with Khomeini in Paris. This was 1977. The money allowed Khomeini to begin his propaganda drive, producing the rabble-rousing cassette tapes that would make him famous in Iran. Prime Minister Amir Abbas Hoveyda of Iran, apologies for my poor pronunciation, an advocate of industrial growth and nuclear energy for Iran, was Watergated and replaced by reactionary Prime Minister Zigar, who reversed Iran's growth policy. Some sources believe that Zigar actively collaborated with Khomeini to destabilize the country. The rest is history. Today in Iran, this is 79, Khomeini and the Muslim Brotherhood preside over a hell. Even more powerful than Khomeini, the Muslim Brotherhood reigns supreme. Its master is Ayatollah Kalakali, the mad assassin who controls the revolutionary courts, whose firing squads gunned down Hoveyda and 300 others. Kalakali is very close to the exile Muslim Brotherhood networks in Western Europe and London that are the present-day British intelligence operation. In 1969, Kalakali was arrested in Iran for having had secret contacts with the Muslim Brotherhood in Kuwait. He is also close to the British intelligence circles in Dubai, UAE. Now, Kalakali lives and sleeps inside Tehran's Qasr prison, where the secret trials and executions by the Islamic Revolutionary Guards take place. Like a sewer rat, he scuttles around in his dungeons, says one highly reliable source. When you are arrested and sent to the Qasr prison, you are in the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood. Even Khomeini cannot reach you. You are held incommunicado. They have their own security forces, unquote. The Muslim Brotherhood in Iran, including Ghorbadzadeh and Ibrahim Yazdi, Iran's foreign minister, is above the comites and above Khomeini. Ghorbadzadeh, who received the first Libyan payment, is widely known in Paris, where he lived in exile as very close to British intelligence. Like Kalakali Ghorbadzadeh is a notorious homosexual sadist, and he is reported to have been a sexual partner of the Ayatollah Khomeini himself. During their stay in Paris in 1978 together, Khomeini and Ghorbadzadeh met a series of intelligence agents working to topple the Shah, including Marvin Zonis, Zygmunt Nagorsky of the Council on Foreign Relations, and Middle East specialist Joseph Malone. Ghorbadzadeh has strong links with the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria. He carries a Syrian passport, and he is also close to the extremist Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine of George Habash, who is an Israeli agent himself. Ghorbadzadeh may soon be named as Iran's ambassador to London. Under the rule of these lunatics, Iran is disintegrating fast. Most extreme is the case of the Iranian military. There are no soldiers left in the army, said a source, not one. He continued, most of them have been lost in the ranks of the Shiite demonstrations. They have been brainwashed and have become Islamicized. Now what I am afraid of is that when Khomeini collapses, which he must, an Islamic general will emerge to rally around him an extremist Muslim party. And that author was Robert Dreyfuss, July 10th to 16th, 1979. So the main thing that I get from this is a clear narrative that from the Muslim Brotherhood was a tool of British intelligence that was used to create the crowds that were pumped up by the media and allowed the Iranian Revolution in 1953 to overthrow Mossadegh, whose crime, of course, was nationalizing the oil company, the Anglo-Persian oil company that was actually British Petroleum and became BP. So to nationalize all that oil was unacceptable, of course, to the Western powers, and that includes the United States. That was a big problem for the Dulles brothers and for their clients, the big corporations. And so they used American power to create that overthrow. This is the beginning of the CIA's secret, secret government in a way. It is a question that I want to raise. Let me take this off because I want to just talk to you for a minute. So the question that I want to raise is, if Britain installed Khomeini, then doesn't Britain still have control over his successor, Khamenei, is spelling with an A instead of an O and an EI at the end? The successor that was appointed supreme leader in 1989 upon Khomeini's death carried on the same policies, toned it down, said stop shouting death to America or America is Satan. They stopped shouting that, but nevertheless carried on a policy of very much anti-Israeli and anti-American rhetoric and actions. And of course, we have a whole history of Iran supporting the Hezbollah and other problems that are around the world that come from the Ayatollah era. So the question right now is this going to just be another puppet that gets put in place because the previous puppet wasn't compliant? When President Trump says to the Iranian people, we're doing this for you, we're freeing you from this horrible regime of Ayatollahs, doesn't propose any particular alternative except for the fact that the Pahlavi heir is making a lot of noise saying, pick me, to resume the peacock throne. A person, just because his name, he's like the grandson of Reza, the Shah. So that's the only candidate that I know of, other than to turn it on its head and say, well, wait a minute, maybe the West really lost control of Iran. Maybe Khamenei has been able to assert an independence like a lot of people think Putin was able to do, to say, okay, we've got some assets here. We can build an economy. We can have a sovereign country. And let's, I used to be one of those rabble rousers, but now I'm looking, more as a statesman and an artist and a patriot, and saying, let's make Iran great again. And that's been, the fight since then is now, sanctions. Because the main reason that Iran can't be great again is because of the Western sanctions, and it's particularly on the oil. I'm going to move on now to another EIR article by the same writer, and this one is in 1981, so it's a little bit later. but I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from this one as well. Oh, hang on a second. All right, this one also by Robert Dreyfus, April 28th, 1981. And the question he poses, who is keeping Khomeini in power? All right, let's get into it. More than 26 months after the mob upsurge that accompanied Ayatollah Khomeini's February 1979 coup d'etat, conditions within Iran have reached a point at which the fall of the Islamic Republic is a serious possibility. Virtually the whole of Khomeini's original constituency, including the middle class, students, merchants, and some tribal leaders, have abandoned him. Only a tiny fraction of the population still supports the Ayatollah and his hangers-on. Strikes and anti-Khomeini demonstrations are commonplace throughout the country. Even among the grand Ayatollahs, the chief leaders of Iran's Shiite community, a majority now opposes Khomeini's version of Islamic government. Yet, Khomeini is still there. The continued existence of the Islamic Republic is generally recognized in Washington as a danger to the stability of the entire Middle East and to the most fundamental U.S. interests. Iran exiles are willing to cooperate with a potential Reagan initiative on Iran. An opportunity now exists for American moves to help Iran rid itself of the mullahs. I have to stop and say this is in 1981 that he's writing this. America moves to help Iran rid itself of the mullahs. Well, I guess we're a little late, but we're here or there. Provided that the White House defines such a policy in conjunction with its French and German allies and in coordination with the Soviet Union. How does Tehran's regime still manage to cling to power? The fact is that Khomeini is supported from the outside by an international consortium of powers. In general terms, the coalition propping up the mullahs is precisely the one that, in 1977 to 78, launched the destabilization of Iran, toppled the Shah, and created the Islamic Republic in the first place. That constellation of forces includes the London oil and financial aristocracy centered around British Petroleum, Royal Dutch Shell, and the City of London banks, the British Secret Intelligence Service, and its world-famous Orientalist division, the Socialist Second International, including Willy Brandt, Olaf Palme, and in the United States, the, quote, Ramsey Clark faction, unquote, and the World Zero Growth Movement. Okay, but all of these people, all of these institutions, oil companies and zero growth movement, uh, socialism and British Intelligence Service, all these put together are the constellation of forces that supporting the Ayatollah Khomeini. It is also this London-centered coalition that controls the runaway government of Menachem Begin in Israel and uses the pro-Begin faction of the Mossad, in Israel's intelligence service, to support the Khomeini movement. Finally, the Soviet KGB intelligence service and Comintern-style networks of communist parties and fellow travelers in the Arab world and Iran continue to supply moral and political support and arms to Tehran. I filed this report after a series of trips to London, Frankfurt, Paris, and Los Angeles, where I met and discussed the Iran crisis with leading members of the Iranian exile community. In the pages that follow, we will look at the real reasons for the survival of the Khomeini regime, at the brewing insurrection in Iran, at the Iran exiles, and the prospects for a new government. Khomeini's friends in London and Moscow. The Khomeini regime was installed to force a drastic increase in the price of oil and a sharp reduction in world energy consumption as part of an overall Malthusian strategy to reduce world industrialization and population. Okay, let's take a second and just absorb that. The Khomeini regime was installed to force a drastic increase in the price of oil. Is it possible that today the American-Israeli attack on Iran was designed to force a drastic increase in the price of oil and a sharp reduction in world energy consumption as a part of an overall Malthusian strategy? Malthus, the man who says that there's the overpopulation is going to cause us to end the world. It's going to be the end of the world if we don't restrict our population, and that's the British India Company philosophy about useless eaters. It's where it all comes from. So this all traces back to British intelligence operations such as Lord Palmerston in the first half of the 19th century, creating a world in which Britain dominates everybody. And if you're not part of the big club, then you really are nothing more than another piece of cattle in their farm. That's how important this is. So that is a rationale that's very hard to believe in and absorb as a person, that just maybe hasn't studied this stuff. But once you get into it, the whole question of eugenics and reduction of the world population is part of the most elite discussions in the 20th century, and especially involving the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Henry Kissinger, the American versions in the CIA and the the Pilgrim Society, Council on Foreign Relations, which was mentioned in the last article. Is this all part of a big plot? It sounds very, very conspiratorial, doesn't it? Nevertheless, there's a lot of evidence for it. Okay, so back to our theme. The regime was installed to force a drastic increase in the price of oil and a sharp reduction in world energy consumption as part of an overall Malthusian strategy to reduce world industrialization and population. In part, the strategy was successful. The Iranian Revolution forced the price of oil to $38 per barrel in 1979 from about $14 in 1978, and Tehran's war with the Iraqis eliminated a great portion of Iraq's 4 billion barrels of oil per day in exports, further squeezing global oil supplies. At the same time, the rise in energy prices has contributed to an industrial recession in the United States and Western Europe. During the Iranian Revolution, and the jump in oil prices, Paul Volcker applied a drastic tightening in credit with worldwide effects, including a cutback in industrial investment. The increase in the cost of energy caused by the Iran crisis and Volcker's interest rate squeeze were the twin applications of London's policy since 1979. To understand the enormous implications of any change of government in Iran today, meaning 1981, consider the following. Should the Iran-Iraq war come to an end? Oh yeah, that war was still going on. I was in London in 1980 when that war heated up, and it was horrible. Horrible, horrible war. Should the Iran-Iraq war come to an end and some sort of stable government replace Khomeini, there would immediately exist the potential for up to 10 million barrels a day in additional oil production based on 1978 levels. Although less than 10 million barrels would start to flow right away, given market conditions and damage to Iranian and Iraqi oil fields, the renewed flow of oil would set into motion an unprecedented development, a regular and steady decrease throughout the 1980s in the real price of OPEC oil. And the author italicizes that for emphasis. Saudi Arabia, currently producing more than 10 million barrels a day, would probably cut its output quite sharply to accommodate renewed Iran Iraq oil. Such a measure, however, would give the Saudis almost fingertip control over world oil prices. Using the weapon of its spare capacity, Saudi Arabia could enforce a stable, non inflationary oil price for the foreseeable future. OPEC's hawks, Libya, Algeria, and Kuwait, would completely lose their power over world oil markets. From London's standpoint, this would be a catastrophe. Current British policy calls for oil prices to roughly double by 1982 to approximately $70 to $80 a barrel. Under current conditions of a world oil glut and a few indications that OPEC prices have already started to drop slightly, the British are dedicated to maintaining the Khomeini regime. Wow. Does that make sense? I mean, it really is all about oil. It's all about the price of oil. And the Khomeini regime being there is convenient to the way that they want to shape the oil market in the future. Thus, the British-controlled Seven Sisters, led from London by British Petroleum and Shell and from New York by Mobil Oil, are currently exploiting their extensive intelligence links to both the Bani Sadr and Beheshti factions in the Iranian government. Their policy is to encourage a prolonged Persian Gulf conflict that will keep oil markets off balance and contain further OPEC price cuts. All right, I'm going to stop reading that article here and commend the rest of it to you to read on your own. It's you can find these EIR articles by going to larouchepub.com, and just there's a index there that you can easily find articles on whatever topic. I'm looking at your comments now. Thank you for dropping a few comments in the chat. Polly, Daryl Brand is here, and yep, Kermit Roosevelt. Everybody who's starting to study this stuff will find out that Kermit Roosevelt, who was, I think, a nephew of President Roosevelt, was a OSS CIA guy that organized the coup against Mossadegh. So clearly, British and American oil interests working together. Let's take some comments. Bright More Dinosaur. Starmer is currently in Parliament talking about Operation APAC Fury. Right, APAC Fury, I get it. And his decision to send UK jets to join the friendly skies in the Middle East in a purely defensive role. Yeah, there's another point that I would make about this. I mean, President Trump is trying to get us to believe that this war is necessary because of an imminent threat against the United States. I've heard it put in this way, that the Iranians were planning a preemptive strike that we had to preempt. I mean, that's what they're saying. British base in Cyprus was bombed. Yeah, yeah. I understand that it's important to distinguish between the British base, which is British national territory, and Cyprus itself, which would involve Greece. Saudi's oil giant Aramco bombed and shut down. That is the biggest oil processing refinery in the world, and it's shut down. Straits of Hormuz shut down. Think we're going to have higher oil prices? Yeah. You think the people that are behind this know that there's going to be higher oil prices and maybe, I don't know, had something to do with the decisions? But I'll just give you my basic best guess at it. I think that this is all about Donald Trump and his personal relationship with the Iranian regime. He has said in through spokespeople spoken his suspicion, and I think that he believes it, that the attempts on his life were made by Iranians on behalf of the Iranian government. And that makes sense because they would be seeking revenge for his assassination of General Soleimani, which, this is blood oath territory. This is, you kill my guy, I'm killing you. And so they've come after him, and whether or not it's in the best interest of the United States is a good question, but whether it's in Donald Trump's best interest to get rid of the guys that have put out a hit on him, it makes sense to me that this is Donald Trump thinking in terms of mafia wars. And I think he's quite familiar with that idea. So, has Donald Trump hijacked the American military in order to settle a personal grudge, a personal vendetta? Uh, That's one of the things that I'm considering. I love the hopium. Oh man, wouldn't you like to find that the war's over within a week? No more Americans are killed, and the Iranian guards laid down their arms and said, okay, come on in. We're ready to do business. And the stock market goes crazy, and there's $10 million worth of $1 trillion worth of trade deals suddenly with Iran, and it would be a wonderful, amazing outcome that most people think is just hopium. Uh, but there are two very stalwart ladies that are supporting Trump 100%, and that's Barbara Boyd and Susan Kokinda at Promethean Action, and I follow them, and I recommend that people follow them too. It's fascinating how they were like most of their careers working with LaRouche, before he died, and then they split off to carry on their own uh, messaging, which is completely different from what the LaRouche organization is saying. The LaRouche organization with Diane Sayre running for president now is condemning President Trump's war and calling it um, the Epstein class. It's, the Epstein class is war. Yep, big insurance shutting down too. Brightmore says the same Muslim Brotherhood that spawned Huma Abedin, wife of Soros. Isn't that fascinating? Huma Abedin, the very close assistant to Hillary Clinton. Road Warrior, how you doing? I'm still skeptical whether Ayatollah was killed or just retired to life on the island. Yeah, he's on, Mystery Island, or not Mystery Island. It's my island. He's on. Uh, what's the island with Ricardo Montalban and the little short guy? Anyway, he's out there sipping mojitos, I'm sure, and no longer worried about the cares of the world. Road warrior. I was attending university in Seattle, uh, UW, in 1979 when Iranian students were protesting. Lather, rinse, repeat. I was in college in the early 70s, and I remember it must have been about 75 or so when I was still in Williamsburg, but already graduated, just hanging around working in the restaurants. And upstairs from us in the apartment, somebody got a roommate. His name was Masood, and he was Iranian, and he had a banjo, and he was trying to learn how to play bluegrass banjo. I didn't know how to play the banjo at the time, but I encouraged him and got some Flatt and Scruggs records and played for him. I don't ever know what happened to him, but that's a time when the Iranian people were starting to be able to travel. Uh, so yeah, and then in 1980, when I was on my first trip overseas, I was in Trafalgar Square when something horrible happened in the war, and they were doing the chemical. Oh, it was awful. Key Jason's here. He says 79 Iran, the upper CIA left before embassy siege, often stirring up Azeris. I don't know the subtlety of that, but I have read that the top level of the CIA were out of the embassy when the embassy siege began in Tehran. Right, more dinosaurs. Several Pakistani protesters killed while storming the U.S. embassy there. Yeah, it's bad stuff happening in Pakistan as well. How long before a false flag is blamed on Iran and Muslims? Yeah, we just don't know anymore, and they've gotten they've gotten so good at these computer generated images and video, and uh, it is part of the program which William Casey announced, which said, we will know we've been successful when the American people no longer know whom to believe. And creating all of these abilities to fake uh, important people doing things, saying things, and bad things is part of the program. They want us to be unable to trust anything and completely dependent upon the narrative that they feed us. Key, Jason, the strategy of tension to sell weapons and security guarantees now shown to be inadequate. I'm not sure I get it. Might need to hear a little more on that. Brightmore, I agree with Catherine Austin Fitz that this is a plot to sink the currency of the oil-rich BRICS nations in anticipation. Oh my goodness. In anticipation of the imposition of global programmable currency. Well, that digital currency is definitely on the horizon and being implemented around the world as we speak, including in Russia. You remember our friend Riley Wagaman, also known as Edward Slavsquat in his Substacks. He had to leave Russia uh, and unable to do his work there. It's, the idea that there's some great country out in the world that's not us, that's not the U.S., It doesn't fly. This is the best place to live, and it's just so hard to rise up to the responsibility that we have to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, especially when we have leaders that will do things that the Constitution says don't do it. I mean, it's clear the war power is in Congress, and he's saying he's at war. It's not like he's saying I'm doing a military operation that'll last 2 weeks. He's saying this is a war. Well, if you want a war, you got to go like FDR did to the Congress and ask them to declare war. And it's ridiculous that we don't do that. It's horrible. This is one of the other things that have come as a result of the Kennedy assassination being allowed to be covered up. The coup d'état of the United States, November 22nd, 1963, and the people who ran that coup are running our government today. Whether Trump is part of it or just somebody that's being swept up into it, or whether he's a master 5D chess player in the great game, I don't know. But at this point, the connection between what our government does and what the Constitution says has been severed. It's not connected anymore. And so all he has to do is say, I'm going to war, and everybody's like, okay, we're going to war. Oh, there's another important point. Imagine that. Yeah, interest rates. What's going to happen to interest rates when the oil starts going up again? Probably a good time to fill up your tanks. Yeah, I think maybe so. Maybe so. Polly, it's great to hear from you as always. The Shah was very popular in the Netherlands, and his wife Farah Diba. Okay. Imagine that's going along. Agrees with me. They gamed this out years ago. Amazing that the U.S. could not protect its own bases abroad from bombings. And it is unbelievable that, that big radar that they hit on the first day was vulnerable to the Iranian rockets, missiles. How could it be that we went into this war without absolutely 150% certainty that we could not be hit by an Iranian missile? That again, it seems to me like a knee-jerk reaction if Trump had just decided to pull the trigger with Netanyahu. Did Netanyahu force him to do it, or is Netanyahu giving him cover for doing it? And Brightmore says, "Let it happen on purpose." This is my phrase that I picked up a year ago somewhere. Made it happen on purpose, or let it happen on purpose. And in the context of uh, the bad stuff in vaccines, and of course that happens in the context of war for sure. The undeclared war on Iran also serves as a nice distraction from the juggernaut of data centers development. Yes, indeed. Brightmore Dinosaur, thank you for saying this. If only most Americans could hear the article you read, John. The normies are hopelessly lost. They're so hopelessly lost, and it's so sad for me because I have so many people that I considered as lifelong friends, and they just don't pick up the phone. They don't care what I'm doing. They don't, you know, it's just remarkable uh, how divisive these past 5 years have been, 5, 6 years. It really started with the Pussy Hats. When they started the Pussy Hat thing, that's when the women got radicalized and decided, that neither they nor anybody that was going to be associating with them was going to have anything to do with anybody that would even say a nice thing, even give Donald Trump the time of day. Let's put it that way. Yep. But thank you for that, Brightmore. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm doing. I'm sending it out there, and you guys can pass it around as much as you like to. I would love to have, I used to have almost 12,000 subscribers until YouTube took me down, and I don't have that first channel back yet. They gave me my second channel back, but my big channel, the one that I did all the work with George on, is gone, and they won't give. It's in limbo right now. Okay, I filed an appeal, 3, 4 months ago, and they said that we haven't decided yet, and it's still sitting there with. If you go and look and say, well, it's still under review. All right, just running out of time today, but it's been great to have a chance to chat with you guys. Garden Girl says Iran just hit Ras Tanura oil refinery in Saudi Arabia, one of the largest. Yeah, it's in somebody's best interest to have the price of oil go up. Maybe it could possibly have something to do with taking over the oil of Venezuela. Do you think? Well, it's one thing I've been thinking. Yeah, Brightmore. George got all of his shows back, I understand, and I don't understand why I didn't get mine, but anyway, there must have been something in there that they just can't stand, whatever it was. I don't know. I don't know. And there's Razvedka. I'll give you the last word this morning. I'll be back tomorrow. I think I may do another Mindfields. I've not done any in a while, and it feels good. So maybe I'll see you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Time here at McDuff Lives. And thanks for joining in the chat today and all the kind words. We'll see you tomorrow right here, 11 a.m. Eastern Time.